Hey class, this is a video for lab 7 for Godot. This is probably going to be the shortest video for these labs. We're just going to go over exporting your game so that you can turn it in for the midterm. So this is Godot Lab 7. There's really just a few steps here, so we can just get to it. So to get started, we are going to need one thing that we're going to want to update is the icon, the art for the game. You probably maybe you've noticed that there's a default icon that got generated when you created your Godot project. That's like the Godot logo. We want to change that to some of our own art. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. So I have my Pascal window open with my gallery. I'm just going to choose some art that I created to use as the icon. You could create new art for this. You could really do anything you want with this. I'm going to take a look at the icon that Godot had, and we can look at the size there, and then we can just kind of base our icon on that since we know that that's what they're using. So I'm going to go to my MMP 270 folder. Here's my lab 6. That's where I added the audio. I'm going to duplicate this folder and start a new one for the midterm. As usual, I'm duplicating so I can kind of keep my history of work, but you guys can just kind of add into the lab that you're working on. So I'm going to Command D. Let's turn on my key commands. I'm going to hit Command D and duplicate the lab, and I'm going to rename this midterm. So even though this is lab 7, this is what we're going to turn in for the midterm. So I'm just going to call it midterm. And you can see I have the icon right here. That's basically like, what the icon for the game will be, whether it's for a Mac build or PC build or web build. So we want to make sure that that's not just the default Godot icon. So we can take a look at this. It's a PNG image. It's got some transparency, so we know that transparency is supported around these borders. And it's 128 by 128 pixels. So that's not very big. We can do that pretty easily. So I'm going to go back to my browser, and you could really use anything you want. Like, the snake would be good, the character would be good. I could even use like the frame of the character dying. That might be kind of funny. I'm going to use the apple just because it's like really simple. It already has color in it. A lot of the other stuff I'm adding color inside of the game instead of to the original art. But for whatever reason, I made this one with color. So I'm going to choose my apple and click edit. And I only need one frame. My icon cannot be animated. So I'm going to go over to the export tab. And there's a button down here at the bottom in the PNG section that just says selected frame. So I'm just going to go ahead and export that first frame. But notice if your scale is like very small, this is going to be too small. So I can move the scale up. I can't get exactly 128 by moving the slider, but I can just go in here and type in 128. And that actually is just going to fill it in for me. So I'll do that. And then I'm going to click download. So now I can go back to my Finder. And so now I have the icon there. And if I open up a new window and go to my downloads folder, here's my new apple that I want to use for my icon. And I'm just going to rename this icon. Okay, I could actually leave the name and go into Godot and change the code to load a different image. But it's easier if I just rename it icon, then Godot is just gonna find it there. So I'm gonna rename it icon.png, and then it's gonna ask me if I wanna replace. So I'm gonna say yeah. And so now when I go back to Godot, what we're gonna see is that it will use that as the icon when we export. So that's the only real prep work we have to do. So I'm gonna close this. I'm gonna go ahead and double click on my project.godot. Since I'm using Mac, you can do that on Windows if you have that set up. If not, you'll have to open Godot first. Okay, so when I'm in my project, I'm not really gonna edit anything or change anything, so I don't really need to do anything. Unless you're not done with your project, you can make changes and kind of clean things up if you want for the midterm. But all I'm really gonna do is go into my project and go to project settings. One thing that you might want to check before you export is the window size. So I've talked about this with a couple of you guys individually, but if I go down here in project settings general and go to display and then window, there's a button to make the window resizable. I haven't really spent any time making sure that my game looks good at different sizes. And so to avoid having to do that, I'm just going to uncheck this resizable button. If you want your game to be resizable, you should leave that on. If you want your game to be full screen, you can also click on there and it'll force the game to be full screen. That's something that you might want to do, but you don't need to. So I'm just gonna set that setting. That's pretty much all I'm gonna do here. And I'm gonna click save. And now I'm ready to export. So I'm on the Mac and I'm gonna export actually for the Mac, Windows, and for the web. So regardless of what platform you're on, you can actually export for other platforms, which is kind of nice. As far as like turning in the project, you can use any platform that you want. I'll be able to access them anyway. So if you're on Windows and you want to do Windows, that's fine. If you're on Mac, you want to do Mac. Or if you want to do web, you can also do that as well, although you will need to publish it. To export, I go to Project, I click Export. And when you open this up, you may not see anything here. We're gonna create some templates, and you can create a little template so that it makes it easier to export in the future. So we click Add, and you can see there's templates for a few different things. There's Android, there's iOS, there's HTML5, which is the web, Mac OS X, Windows Universal, which is like for Xbox and Windows and everything else. And then Windows Desktop, which is what I'm going to do since we're just going to be doing desktop. And then Linux. If any of you guys are on Linux, you might want to use that. That would be cool. I don't have a Linux, so you might need to do something else for the midterm. But anyway, I'm going to start with Mac. So I'm just going to click Mac. If you are doing Windows or Mac and you haven't actually downloaded the build stuff, you'll get an error when you click on it that will show up down here. And it's pretty much you just click on a few different buttons to download the package that actually exports the file. If you have any trouble with that, let me know, we can go over it. You may have downloaded it when you downloaded Godot originally, but if you didn't, because you can download different pieces, you'll see an error there, and you just have to click on the button. It'll say like manage installation things, and then just click on the one for the version of Godot that you have. It'll take a little while to download. They're kind of large. They're like maybe a few hundred megabytes or something like that. So that'll take a second, but once you've got that done, you can come back and do the export. So with our export, you can see runnable, we want that on, and then we can choose an export path. So we want to make sure we know where this file is going to be. And by default, it has like your main project folder. I'm going to create a folder and do some organizing here because I like to have things organized. You could just throw it in the main folder if you want. Especially for Mac, you're only going to get one file, so you don't really need that much organization. But for Windows or PC, you have multiple files, and it's better to have it organized. So I'm going to make a builds folder. Builds is like, you know, when you're building the project. And then in here, I'm actually going to create a Mac folder just to make this a little more organized. And I can make a zip or a DMG. I'm going to choose a DMG. That's just going to make, you know, it easy for people to open it. And I'm just going to call this mygame.dmg. Obviously, use the title of the game that you created here. And then I'm just going to click save. And there's a bunch of other settings. I don't really think we need to worry too much about any of these settings. You know, if we run into errors, let me know and we can look at it. So once I've got that all set up, I click export project and I click save. And that's going to take a second. And once that is done, it's going to show up in my builds Mac folder. And we'll just take a look at it to make sure it worked. It's pretty fast. Hopefully I don't get any errors. Okay, and there it is. So mygame.dmg. It's 22 megabytes, so it's not tiny. It's not huge. You could archive it when you upload it to Blackboard, or when you turn it in. To do that, you can just go right-click and do compress, and that will make an archive. And it's not that much smaller. Okay, the game is 22, the Mac is 21. So, it's not that much smaller, but you save a little bit of space that way. If your game is more complicated, you'll get more file size savings there. To test this real quick, you should definitely test it before you turn it in, because if it doesn't work, I'm not going to be able to grade it. So if you want to test it, you can just, open it as soon as you get it. And that's going to open up this DMG. You can run it from here. You might want to drag it onto your desktop or into your applications or folder or whatever. You can see we have our nice icon for our art. I'm going to double click and it should just run. And there it is. So that looks good. I shouldn't be able to resize the window, so it doesn't let me do full screen or anything because I turned that off. If you didn't turn that off, you should be able to resize the window. I should be hearing music, but I might have it muted. Oh, I don't have it on the right thing. Okay, so there's some music, so that's good. Whoops. Okay, I was trying to mute it. Okay, so the music is working, so then I'm gonna click start game, and there we go. So then you can see my game is working. I can actually play it, and I can send this to anybody, you know, online, and they can play it. I could put it on itch.io if I want, and let's just see if the game over, there we go. And if I hit quit, it should close the window. It takes a second, but that's pretty good. So, you know, just make sure to test it before you turn it in. You want to make sure it works. So that's pretty good. I'm going to eject this folder. And then let's go over Windows and web real quick. So since I'm in the build folders now, I'll just go ahead and I'll make my Windows build, and I'll make my web build. So I'll just have those folders ready so I don't have to make them in the program. So I'm back in Godot, and I'm just gonna click add, and we'll go to Windows desktop next. You don't really have to do anything here. There's a whole bunch of settings that you might wanna play around with, but we don't really, it should be pretty much fine. So then we just need to choose the folder where we wanna export. So I'm going to choose Windows here and do save. And we also don't want it to have DMG in it. That's from our Mac. So let's rename this just my game. And this is going to be an executable. So we'll click save here. So it's an exe file. So that means you can just run it on Windows. There's a few options, but that's going to be the easiest one. So I'm going to go to export project, choose Windows, mygame.exe, and click save. And you'll notice with the Windows export that it actually has two files that get created. So it's going to take a second to pack everything together. You can see it going through all of the different files, and then it looks like it's done. So if we look at Windows, there's the executable, and then there's also the pack file. So you need the pack file to run the game. It can't run just with the executable. The pack file has like all the images and all that stuff. So we need that to work. And so the easiest way to turn in the Windows is actually to compress it, so you don't have to worry about having those two files together. So compress the Windows. And then you might want to rename this file like mygame.zip or something like that. And then you can submit that. I'll run it on my Windows computer. And I've tested it exporting from Mac and Windows, and it seems to work fine with both. If there are any issues with that, we can work on it. So that's Mac and Windows. That should cover basically everybody. I'll show what the web looks like in case you want to experiment with that real quick. If you want to make a web build, you can go to HTML5. You're going to want to save it as HTML. So you're going to want to save this file. The main file is index.html. You can use other HTML names, but that's going to be the easiest one. I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to click save there. And you can say for desktop or for mobile. We'll just leave this as for desktop. And I'm not going to really play with anything else. I'm just going to go to export and save. And that is also making a pack file, and it's making a few other files to make it run in the browser, some JavaScript, a little bit of CSS, and some WebAssembly. So when that's done, now you can see this web version has a whole bunch of files. And the only way this is going to work, if I try to open this, it's not going to run because basically I need to be running a server. You can see there's a whole bunch of errors that pop up. If I want to run this on my computer, I'm going to need to run a local server. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this because it's not super relevant. But if I wanted to do that, I would open up my terminal, I'd do CD and drag this over here, and then I could say python-m http://server, I think is what I can do. And that's going to start a nice little local server for me. And so if I go to localhost and type in 8,000, just matching what you see here. Now we can see that the game is actually going to run. I noticed that it says debug up here. That's probably something I should have taken out, but it's just the midterm, so let's not worry about that. So it doesn't have like the sizing of the game. It takes up the whole window, so that's a good thing to be aware of. But let's see if it actually works. So it does work, and it looks pretty good. And let's see if the audio is working too. Yeah, the audio is working as well. So it is pretty easy to make the web version of the game. You don't have to do that, but one benefit of the web version is if you want to publish it on itch.io, you basically have what you need. You just need to make a zip file, and then if you go to itch and make a profile and start a new game, when you publish a web game, all you need is a zip of that game. And so if I go here and go to compress web, it's going to make a little zip file. And I can call this my game.zip. And oh, that already has one. So we'll just leave it as web.zip. And as long as you have an index file in that zip folder, itch can actually publish your game. You can also publish your Mac or your Windows version as well. But if you want to have the game playable on the web to send to people, that's a good way to do it. So I won't go into a ton more detail there because we are going to publish our final projects on itch. So we'll do more details about itch at that point. Anyway, that's basically everything that you need to do to be able to export your game and submit it for your midterm project. You will want a compressed file. That's going to be a lot easier to upload to Blackboard when you submit the project. And then I can download it and unzip and play the game. And if you want to put it on the Open Lab, you can also put it on Open Lab. You can just drag the zip file like you would other media, or you could share it on Discord. If you want other people to play the game and try it out, you could probably it would probably be easier just to put it on Discord. So if you want your classmates to check out your game, that's what I would do. So yeah, that's it for this video. It's actually, as usual, a little bit longer than I thought it would be, but I just wanted to cover all 3 different methods for exporting. And keep in mind, you only have to do one. Any platform is fine for the midterm. So let me know if you have any questions, message me on Discord, or I'll talk to you in class.